We welcome everyone. A little something different today after 5 weeks of either hearing Gil or myself go on and on. Decided to give you a break, and we're joining forces today to accommodate, I guess, President's Day and how that disrupted some of the class schedule. So we're deviating in our sports facility class from our normal routine, and I'm sure Gil is as well in his risk management class. Normally, we would have done the same old routine, so enjoy the break today. Gil and I also do a podcast called Venue Visionaries, so we're recording this, so we'll probably take portions of this for our podcast that we do. And the podcast is mostly for college students, just to talk through real world situations that sports facility people get themselves into, and discuss, how you should handle it. And so a lot of times there's no right or right answer. It's just sort of your best educated guess to get some student input on it. And we sort of share that, like I said, in a podcast, so people, aspiring sports students or sports professionals can learn from it, and also get themselves thinking about it as well. So this week, we're talking about our normal chapter in our class would have been sports facility construction, and obviously Gil's class is risk management. So we decided to sort of combine topics that sort of matched both those things. It's about sports facility construction and the risk mitigation part of it as well. So Gil, do you have anything you want to add or throw in there while we're admitting more people here?
Sure. One of the things that we started taking a look at is, and I do it with my class every day, is what are current event stories that are going on. And you had, unfortunately, a major tragedy in Rhode Island with the shooting at Ice Rink earlier this week. And when you start taking a look at safety and venues and how they're built, how they're designed, it is very difficult to design out all possible issues that might arise. There's always going to be issues. There's always going to be stuff outside the pale. This is a family dispute, from what I understand, that resulted in the unfortunate 3 deaths, 2 victims, and then the shooter as well. And when you're running venues like this and designing venues like this, you have to think of what are the top concerns. So I often ask my students, this question of what is the number one cause of death for people in the sport industry? I know it's not something that people want to talk about, but it's often worthwhile exploring that. And the number one cause, does anyone have any thoughts as to what is the number one cause of death for people working in the sport industry? Anyone have any thoughts? No? Matt, what would you think it is?
So the question is the number one cause of death in a sports facility?
For people working in the sport industry in general.
Working in the sports industry. Okay, because some of the things that came to mind, and I don't know if these are the number one things, but these are the things that I think probably the students don't think about that I think about. Mechanical issues are very prevalent in sports facilities, not necessarily the sport industry. There is not a year that goes by that a fan doesn't die or get seriously hurt on an escalator related accident. And it's usually fan misbehavior, fans drinking too much, thinking they're cute and riding down the rail, and then not thinking that if they fall back the wrong way, they're going to plummet 40, 50, 60 feet to their death. I've read and seen a lot about that. That keeps me up at night as a sports. What do you do to prevent it other than having ushers at the top and the bottom just to yell at people when they do that? Also, again, probably not the right answer, but it's a thing that popped to mind. Escalators are much more dangerous than you think. I'm going to be your father here, whether you want it or not for the next second. Next time you're on an escalator, think twice about it. Don't lean your foot against the side of the escalator as it's going up or down. Don't wear flip-flops up an escalator, because we've had a lot of close calls where people put their feet in the wrong spot and the treads eat it. And then you have about 10 seconds to get your foot separated from your shoe, or else the escalator is going to eat your foot. So that's not the right answer, Gil, but that's the thing as a sports venue operator I think about. And speaking of facility construction, I'll bring it back to facility construction. The escalators they put in today stop a lot quicker than the old escalators. They have all these safety features, but the downside of that is our escalators are now forever going out at a sporting event when we're trying to get 40,000 people to their seats. Somebody steps on it the wrong way and it shuts down. We've helped to save maybe a life or two or a foot or two, but at the same time, we've created a logistical problem while doing that. So Gil, what's the right answer?
And then when you cause that logistical error, what ends up happening is that people don't want to get off, so they start walking on the escalators because they're conditioned to it. And when you have too much weight load on an escalator, it could collapse, causing even more injuries. So it's a major headache. Any other thoughts as to the number one cause of death in the sport industry? So the answer is vehicular deaths. That there are a lot of things when people are transporting one thing to another, from one location to another, like an ESPN truck driving across country to bring a satellite or the broadcast crew or whatever it might be. That I served for many years on a federal task force designed to reduce workplace injuries and deaths in our sector, and the data shows that that's the number one cause of death. Number two, unfortunately, are shootings. And we see that, unfortunately, at different locations, such as like health clubs and stuff. We have an active shooter situation, someone who's disgruntled and wants to do something nefarious, unfortunately. Number three are actually tractor/mower related turnovers, where people are like mowing the side of a hill at a golf course and the machine rolls over and crushes them to death. So it's unfortunate that you have to think of the negativity, but it's important to also realize that if you know how people die, then you can take steps to try to minimize it. And this goes back to that news story about Rhode Island. So you can't prevent all these different incidences from happening, but if you take steps to try to minimize, especially when you have notice that there is an issue, even if you don't have notice, how do you plan and prepare for it? And that's what, venue operations is all about, being prepared so you know how to respond when the time comes.
So Gil, let's talk about it, because that's a very timely topic. Obviously, this is an ice rink, so I assume it's a very small facility. But let's say you're building a sports facility. This is a question for the students, or a thought for the students, to see if they have any, whether it's a stadium, arena, smaller sports facility. What can you do to help prevent something like that happening in your sports facility? What can you do, I guess, during the construction, or what policies can you put in place to help mitigate that risk and make it less of a possibility? Anyone with any thoughts?
Come on, guys.
Yeah, let's
It's
talk.
Wednesday afternoon, but
We'll pick on Skylar first. Skylar, what would you do?
All right. So does it matter which one I choose, or can I pick?
No, just any hypothetical sports facility. What would you do as the owner to help mitigate that risk?
Okay, so something like the shooting that happened at like the Pawtucket place, ice rink. Obviously, that's like a smaller facility, and you obviously don't anticipate things like that happening. Having some kind of doesn't even need to be security check-in, just something that like you have to walk through. People bringing in bags, people bringing in those things. Anything now you're in a place with a lot of people around. Sadly, it's anything could happen. So I think just having some kind of security barrier that they have to walk through, it can be something super simple. It doesn't need to be nothing crazy, but just something that they can kind of like make sure bags are checked, make sure people aren't coming in with the thing they shouldn't come in with.
I think that's a good, it's a good point. Like you could build designated entrances and set up like a queuing area for their people's bags to be checked. That's certainly a possibility. That's a good way to do it. If you're at a bigger sports facility and your budget's bigger, then you can have magnometers and sort of the walkthrough things that you have now that will sort of beep when somebody's carrying a gun on them or something they shouldn't be carrying. So that's sort of along the lines I was thinking. Gil, you have a lot of experience in this area. What would you add that somebody could do?
So when we start taking a look at opportunities to inspect bags, things like that, you have one thing is the personnel. Second part is the training of the personnel. And so you have people that are appropriately trained to do that, where they're going to be stationed, how they're going to be able to do their job. Are you going to have what we often call a man trap? And that's one entrance door that you have to go through, then get cleared before you can go into another set of doors to actually enter the venue. That requires time, patience, money, all that kind of stuff. And a lot of people just don't want to do that. So one of the strategies that is often used is called CPTED. That stands for Crime Prevention Through Environmental Design. That can you design your facility from the very beginning to try to minimize the risk of possible issues. So if we're looking at like a smaller rink, maybe you have no trees or no bushes in the front of the building, so you could see people more clearly when they're coming to the front of the building. Maybe it's line of sight issues that you can see around corners. You don't want to have areas where it's blocked off to an extent where someone all of a sudden just appears there, that you have the ability to see them for a significant distance before they get to your location. So CPTED is a huge thing. It was something that came up when I did the Aurora Theater shooting cases in Aurora, Colorado, where 11 people were murdered at a theater. And one of the things they said is that, hey, look, we want our people to do a perimeter check around the venue every 15 minutes. But in the back of the building was a trash and compactor and a trash bin area. And those were behind, brick walls to make it look more attractive. But that made it impossible to see behind there unless you actually walked. And in that case, James Holmes, who was the shooter, hid his car behind that and no one noticed it because it never went all the way around. So you want to have the ability to be able to see all around your facility. You might need cameras, you might need other things like that to help you in that process. But crime prevention through environmental design is from the very beginning thinking crime can happen here. How do we minimize it? And it could be additional lighting, it could be the cameras, it could be what doors are allowed to be open, things like that to control what might be occurring in the venue. So that's how I would answer that, Matt.
Yeah, and I agree with this. So the cameras, they're key. People don't think of them as preventative, making sure but people see cameras and they're less likely to do something. Again, Gil mentioned that budgets are not are finite. So there's a difference between a big sports facility and a small sports facility. Bigger sports facility may have things like facial ID, facial recognition when you go through the gates. That wouldn't have prevented the situation in Rhode Island, but if that person had been a troublesome character who they had thrown out of the building before, they could have spotted that person when they had come in. And some of the things aren't really necessarily tied into how you build the sports facility, but just sort of the policies you have in place. Major League Baseball and the NFL do a good job of, every team has their screening, but what both the NFL and MLB will do is hire a third-party company to come in and try to get access to areas without the proper credentials, sneak things in, and this sort of internal testing sort of test how you're doing, and from that you can see where your weaknesses are. So that's some of the things that they do. And oh yeah, if you have lots of money and good cooperation with the local police department, they'll roll around bomb sniffing dogs, that sort of thing, outside your facility as well, now and again.
Yeah, and just to build upon that, and this is how we do our shows. We talk about something, then it's like, oh, one more issue. So the example that you can take from what Matt was just mentioning entails Madison Square Garden, how they use facial recognition software right now, and they got into a bucket full of trouble because what they were doing was, if you were an attorney and you were involved in any litigation against Madison Square Garden, or even if you weren't involved in the litigation, but you worked for a law firm that was involved in that litigation, they were banning you from attending events at Madison Square Garden. This hit the media big time because a mom came with her daughter who wanted to watch the Rockettes, and the mother was not allowed in because she was an attorney working in a law firm that had a pending case against Madison Square Garden. And so that brought up a firestorm with privacy rights related issues. And, are you punishing someone without, due process? And so this Madison Square Garden is considered a private venue, so they don't have the constitutional right issues there. But, you have to think about putting in these systems in place. So it's having the cameras, having the software, having the people that monitor the system and man it in terms of the individuals looking at it, monitoring it, and acting upon it. And so if you can put this in from the very beginning, it'll save you money. But these are types of facility systems that are being put in on a daily basis.
All right, let's move on to our next topic that's sort of in the news. Sort of includes both sports facility construction and risk mitigation. As everyone knows, the World Cup is coming to North America in 2026. It's the preeminent sporting event along with the Super Bowl. Just crazy stuff. And I guess one of the issues now is they're finding, and I pulled the story where they've awarded the games to certain stadiums in certain cities, and now they're concerned that the World Cup is concerned that multiple host venues in North America are exceeding safe play thresholds, meaning it's extreme heat and rainfall, which I find ironic because they're in the Middle East. The last time the World Cup was here, where it's the middle of the desert. So, and it also reminded me of story of how LA, I think SoFi Stadium got awarded some World Cup action, and then after they were awarded it, I guess somebody took out the tape measure again and found out they didn't have enough space to fit in the field. Now, how that can happen with somebody like the World Cup, I don't know. You'd think you'd know how much space they needed. So then SoFi had to go and figure out how to remove a bunch of seats to accommodate World Cup action. So I guess the question that we'll ask the students, if you guys can please chime in, and then Gil and I will go back and forth, is cost versus safety. So let's say you're SoFi Stadium, and FIFA comes knocking on your door, and you come to an agreement to host the World Cup, and this is a big deal for your stadium, very big deal, very prestigious. And then you find out later that you don't have enough room, and you're going to have to make modifications to your stadium because of this. Obviously, you don't want to lose the World Cup because it would be a big blow. But put yourself in the president of SoFi Stadium, do you feel that you should have to pay for these accommodations, or should the World Cup FIFA have to pay for these accommodations? After all, you made the deal first, and then later you found out that you didn't have enough space. Andrew, whose side are you on that one? What would you do?
I think I'm more on the stadium side. I mean, it's kind of crazy to me that FIFA could kind of overlook this. I know that when usually places are getting vetted for hosting such a major event, it's pretty involved to make sure that they have all the qualifications that would allow them to actually host it. I think it's less on them for putting in the bid and more on FIFA for not double and triple checking that everything will be okay and be good for the actual event to be hosted at the stadium.
Okay. Ashley, do you agree?
I agree, but just to I guess like bring in maybe another idea of kind of what I was thinking. Um do you mean like the stadium would have to like build more seating or like incorporate more like ADA? Like is that like
No,
is
they physically have to take out seating because they don't have enough room for a soccer.
okay.
If that's what it's called. Sorry, my ignorance on soccer.
Yeah, well, part of it is like if it's a permanent thing that in the long run could like make them more money, then I would say maybe like the stadium should pay for that because it could be considered a long-term investment. But if you're taking away seating, that could essentially lose the money in the long term. But if you're adding seating, then I can like understand why that's stadium. But ultimately, if FIFA was the one that came and sought them out, I think it's their responsibility to make sure they meet the criteria. And if you find out weeks or months down the line that they don't, I think that's kind of their responsibility to fix what they, I guess, didn't get ahead of. So I can see both sides.
And Gil, this was a story that surprised me when it came out like 2 years ago. SoFi is known for doing all sorts of different events. So how is a sports facility operator, when you don't know the future, like what kind of events you kind of know what kind of events you're going to have, but you don't know what kind of events you're, in totality. What can you do, or what would you do in building a new sports facility so you could be flexible to host as many different events as possible? Is there anything you can be doing out there?
The thing from the very beginning is making sure the architects understand what possible usages might exist for the venue, and then you build around it. So everyone knows that soccer is a great, opportunity to generate revenue, and they have venues such as MetLife Stadium where they often host big international venues. Mm-hmm. So why not design it from the very beginning to be able to have a 110-meter field or whatever might be that you decide on, rather than just trying to maximize the revenue by getting everyone as close to the action as possible. The problem is that when you say, okay, we're going to be adding an additional 20, 30 feet of field, maybe, you're looking at possibly 30, 40, 50 million extra dollars at least, because just the steel and concrete to expand the scope of it. So what they're often trying to do is what we call value-based engineering, where you want to do what can you get the biggest bang for the buck, and oftentimes it's to increase seating capacity and get closer to the action, because people want to be as close to the playing area as possible. So you have to look at, can you design it from the very beginning, or can you have flexible seating arrangements, or you can move seats one way or another, and that is what happened in the past with the old cookie cutter stadiums, where they could take out a set of bleachers and expand from baseball to football with relative ease. That's a lot more difficult in the custom built stadiums that we have today.
Yeah, for those of you, and I think I mentioned this in another class, when Gil and I were children, this will sound like an old fairy tale. The football and the baseball team basically played in the same stadium. And I worked in the Astrodome, and we had the Astros and the Houston Oilers, now Tennessee Titans, in the same stadium. And our seats were literally on a track. So it'd kind of be like for baseball, it'd be baseball configuration, and we just moved the seats like this for football. So we had great versatility, but now the market changed and teams are building primarily for football first or baseball first. And still, when you do that, you still have to sort of think hey, yeah, I know we're a baseball facility. Hey, I know we're a football facility or a soccer facility, but let's think a little bit longer term. And how is this setup going to affect us for concerts, other sporting events, and try to be as flexible as possible to gather that revenue.
Yeah. And then to go to, you initially started about the weather and the weather related concerns, and how that was a major issue in the last World Cup in the Middle East. And Qatar actually was thinking about for a while of having drones fly overhead holding tarps to shade the field for play. Which is a unique strategy to have drones flying for so long in the air. But on a regular basis, people manipulate the truth, or another way of saying that is lie to get major events. So Atlanta did this for the Olympic Games in 1996, where they told the International Olympic Committee, and you think IOC, they would know what's going on and they could research it. They told the IOC that the weather in August and September in Atlanta was about 4 or 5 degrees cooler than it actually was. And so here they come, and then it gets announced, oh, it's going to be a hot, Olympics. And it's like, that's standard for Atlanta that time of the year, but that's what they put in their proposal, and people just believed it.
Yeah, well, I almost feel that's bad on the Olympic Committee for not realizing that Atlanta's hot in the summertime. But yeah, and it sort of, I mean, I guess you should build your facility based on your geographic area and sort of what weather concerns you have. One of the cases Gil and I have looked at and talked about is the old Metrodome in Minnesota, where they had the Vikings used to play. I think the roof collapsed not once, but twice because of snow. One time it was right after a game, and if the stadium had been occupied, it could have been a lethal event. And I think Bill and I sort of shake our heads. How could they not anticipate large amounts of snow for a sporting roof in Minneapolis?
And the same thing happened in Montreal. That was collapsed due to snow weight load, and that should have been something that was anticipated. Also, closer to you guys, that happened with what's now called the Excel Center. It used to be the Hartford Civic Center, where after an exhibition basketball game, I think it involved the Celtics, if I'm not mistaken, because they used to play some of their home games in Hartford. The roof collapsed, and if it would have collapsed during the game, it would have killed, probably about 15,000 people. And it just happened that it occurred at 2:00 in the morning. That it was the snow load. It was just too much for the roof to hold, and it collapsed. And it took them about 2 years to rebuild the venue.
And then, sorry, Dale. Then we have the other extreme where Tampa Bay lost their roof for the baseball stadium last year because of a hurricane. Now, I don't know if, the stadium had been up for quite a while, so I'm not going to say they didn't do their due diligence, but I'll name drop for a second. But I was speaking to the former owner of the Houston Astros when they built Ben Enron Field. Now, I don't know what they call it now. It used to be Minute Maid Park. And I asked him about hurricanes, and he brought in the best engineers in the world to make that hurricane proof, in sort of his words. And he swears by it. He doesn't own the team anymore, but he told me that he was so confident in that roof that when Houston did have hurricanes, the employees would go to their offices for shelter. They were so confident in it. So, if he's correct, that's an owner, a sports facility manager who, really thought through sort of the local elements and how to make sure he's doing his due diligence.
Any thoughts or questions from you guys so far as we're talking about this and sharing the ideas and experiences?
Well, I got a question. Since most of you guys are in Rhode Island, I'll put you in the spot. Outside of snow, what weather would you design for, or what would you be worried about, like in a place like Rhode Island, that you probably wouldn't be worried about in Southern California if you're building a sports venue there? An open air sports venue.
Oh, I mean, aside from the snow, I'd say the wind, especially like coming over the ocean, like, and Rhode Island's kind of placed in a weird area where like we're near ocean, but there's like a river, multiple rivers that come up to the city. So wind's definitely a factor, especially on the East Coast.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer. It worries me at Oriole Park. We're we're more humid than Rhode Island, but we get pop-up thunderstorms. We're out of nowhere. The winds can whip up to 50 mile an hour. Thunder and lightning, again, something that Southern California rarely sees. So you can get heavy rains in Rhode Island at a certain point. Very rare in Southern Cal, although I understand they're having them today or yesterday. So those are features that you have to think of more if you're building you have to think of what's the geography, what do I have to worry about, and so that's sort of a good answer, very good answer.
And there's stuff that we often really don't consider, such as what if you're next to a sewage treatment plant and you have noxious smell because of the direction of the wind? That has affected a number of stadiums. Or are you in a flight plan? So that way you're by an airport, and what does that mean? How can you use that, or how can that impact your venue?
And those of you who are familiar with the New York baseball scene, the Met Stadium has been forever in the path of LaGuardia Airport. If you go to a game there, man, it shakes your seat. They're taking right off over you and landing right over you. And in some ways, it becomes a home field advantage, because more than once you've seen visiting batters who are in the batter's box and not expecting it, and all of a sudden here comes the pitch and stuff. And so you're right. And I think SoFi, when they built that stadium in LA, they were in the flight path of LAX, and they had to pay hundreds of thousands of dollars of extra unanticipated costs to buy the airport certain equipment or something. I don't know if it was a boondoggle and LAX was just hitting them up for money while they're building the stadium, but they had to do that.
Yeah. That happens sometimes, or you might not get federal approval because airspace is FAA, and so that's Federal Aviation Administration. So it's not, the state might approve everything, but then you have to go through and say, all right, well, what's going on at the federal level?
Gil, you had a good. You sent me an email on a good topic that that was good about March, and timely with March Madness. Do you want to go and break that one down a little bit, and then we can ask everyone what they think about it, and what can be done?
Yeah, and how to address it. So I'm actually giving a presentation in New Orleans next week, and the topic is court storming and field rushes. And a question becomes, how can you try to minimize that? What could be done? And so we've seen efforts such as fines. The SEC has significant fine for court storming or field rushing. It can get into the $500,000 range very, very quickly. But that only addresses the financial ramifications. The bigger issue is, how do you protect the players, the coaches, the officials, the referees, things like that from these types of incidents, which we know are going to happen when you have those big upset wins, but it happens at other times as well. And the question becomes, what could you actually do, and what has been effective, or what might be effective going forward? There was, I think it was 2 years ago now, Caitlin Clark and the player from Purdue, Fitz something, I forget exactly what his name is, a top flight basketball player from Purdue. And both of them, when they were crowd rushes storming onto the court, they got jostled and knocked down. And that could result in injury. for the Caitlin Clark thing. She was at UConn, and someone who just was, hey, I'm running, with their phone, looking at their phone and trying to say hi, and they ran into Caitlin Clark, not even, recognizing that she was there, so to speak, and that could cause serious injury. Because what if it was a career-ending injury that did not allow her to ever play basketball again? Could she sue that person under negligence, and could they win? So the question becomes, what can be done? So I want to hear from you guys what you think might be good strategies going forward. And I can share some of the ideas that are out there, but I want to hear what your thoughts are.
I'll start it off. I think if we're talking about students and we're at college events, I think enticing the students with like not some type of threat, but like something that threatens their eligibility as a student of, say, Providence College. It's better than like a $2,000 fine or getting put in jail and getting paid off bail, which is like $5,000, depending on what it is. But I say putting something that puts their tuition in where they go to school in jeopardy. A lot of people go to schools like Providence that pay $80,000. That's a lot more costly than $5,000 or $2,000 fine or something like that. And you're also risking your education. Say you're a junior, senior, where you've been there for 3 or 4 years, and you're risking all that you've been through.
So that's often seen in the student code of conduct, where they have specific policies and they remind the students that they have to adhere to the student code of conduct. What else?
I always think too, when there's a threat of like the team getting punished in the moment. So whenever like the PA announcer comes over and let's say things are getting thrown on the court and it's going to be a technical foul for the home team or whatever, that usually stops things in their tracks pretty quickly. So not even those like after effect penalties or threats, but in the current situation as well.
That's a really good idea, because when you look at the NBA fighting has dropped a lot, because since they started instituting, if you leave the bench for a brawl, what do you get suspended or something like that, and that hits their paycheck. So yeah, those types of things work.
The question that I would have with that is that some coaches are like, hey, that was well worth it that we got a fine, because the student spirit and the fun and the camaraderie and all that kind of stuff. I have a different take as a lawyer because I've handled so many cases where people have been in and around goalposts, as an example, where they've been torn down and hit someone in the head and they become paraplegic. So, it's all fun and games until someone gets hurt. But Nick Saban actually was on the record saying, what we need to do is we need to really put in something that has teeth. So how about if they rush the field or the court, that the home team forfeits the game, that they lose the game? All of a sudden now, I think a lot of people will change their behavior. How many of you are familiar with the new rules that they've been trying to establish in certain circumstances, and that if you adopt those rules, apply them, and then there is a court storming, that you don't get fined? So do you guys know what I'm talking about there? Really? So it's called a countdown clock. And what they do is they say, okay, game ends, we have 2 minutes. Let's let the teams, players, coaches, officials, whoever it might be, let them exit. We're going to have a countdown that starts at 2 minutes and then goes, all the way to 1 and then 0. And then when we hit 0, you can all storm the court, but give us that time to clear people away so they're safe. And the SEC has said, if you adopt that policy and then people rush early, you're still going to be fine. But if they wait till that period is over and they rush, you're not going to be fine.
And even with that, Gil, it's kind of a dicey issue, because what happens if you're sort of with that, it's a good idea to get the players and whatnot off the field. But now you're sort of allowing people to run onto the court. Suppose one fan and tramples another fan. Guess who's getting sued? The sports facility operator for allowing that to happen. And I can't stress enough how this issue is increasing sort of behind the scenes, where we've had several instances, at least in Major League Baseball, and probably the NFL and the NBA also, and any sport where the athletes get paid a lot of money, that these athletes are now getting, some of them are getting $30-40 million a year. So if something happens, not even by fan storming, if the field is incorrect and they trip and tear a ligament in their knee and they're out for the season, and there goes $30 million worth of an athlete's service, and maybe that affects the rest of his career, which can, the sports facility operators are under a lot of liability pressure in professional sports to make sure things don't happen on the playing field, which is tough because some of the things can be really unanticipated.
So I have a quick question.
Sure.
I'm not like the biggest advocate for court storming. I think it's cool, but I understand the dangers of it and those types of things. And then so with that thing where there's a 2-minute, like almost like delay for them to get the people off the court, like I understand that, but I don't understand how that like necessarily prevent anything outside of giving like the teams. I think you said the SEC was the conference looking to implement it. Like, how does that give them anything outside of like a way to not be liable for what goes on? Because like not the point of court storming, but like let's say you hit a game winner and you beat a team you weren't supposed to beat. Like they run on the court because they're excited, they're celebrating, like they hit a game winner, they're cheering in their seats, 2 minutes, they're waiting. Like at that point, like is there even a reason to storm the court? Like 2 minutes later, I think not all the energy's gone, it's still there, but I feel like it's more of just something that takes off the liability from the teams in that conference for then people when they run, it's like, hey, but we agreed to this. I don't really see the point outside of that.
So it might not impact liability, because normally it's not going to be one student suing another. In all the cases that I've had, they've always named the institution and said the institution should have done something more. The question becomes, what is the more? With that delay, the only thing they're trying to do is protect the players and coaches and referees, because you don't want someone who bet on the game, has lost money, and now they come over there and they want to deck the official that they feel might have hampered their ability to win money, kind of thing. So it's not designed to prevent an injury to fans. It's more for players and coaches and refs and things like that. That risk is still out there. The question is, could that maybe delay the occurrence of something? And by delaying it, maybe that might cause more people to think about it and not want to rush, or to just, I'm going to just head home kind of thing. Maybe that's what they're hoping. But if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. And it's just a shame to see that when it does happen, that people can get injured. You know, I said it's fun games till someone gets hurt.
And the whole on-field thing, is so hard to prevent some of these. For instances, I think probably a lot of you watched the Super Bowl, whatever that was, a couple of weeks ago. Trust me, the NFL, especially for the Super Bowl, has mind-boggling number of contingencies in place, but yet a fan still was able to get on the field and run around during the Super Bowl and delay the game a little bit. And of course, while that's happening, the average fan in the stand probably laughs, but for the head of security, the facility operator, team presidents that going down the line, there's probably panic because they don't know what that person's going to do. Like Gil said, they don't know if they have a knife or whatever. And it's not only embarrassing, but it's kind of a terrifying couple of minutes until they subdue the person. So even with the best of plans, it's hard to stop some of these things. But like Gil said, as a risk mitigation measure, you have to show at least that you have these plans in place.
And one of the things with that is you got to communicate that plan effectively to the players. because in the Super Bowl incidents, one of the players tried to tackle him. And what if they tackled him successfully, but so successfully the person is injured and now they sue the athlete? And because it happened during a game while the person was doing their work as a football player, they're probably going to name the team as well because the team is the employer. And so you have vicarious liability as a concern there. So you just got to be very careful in and around the venue. And then there's all these little side areas. Well, what if they break equipment on the sideline? What if they steal equipment on the sideline? Things like that that come into play. So it's a tough situation that venues are going to be facing with this. And you could lose your insurance coverage. There's so many different things that could happen. So the best policy is to try to educate people and have the rules, just like, was it Russell who mentioned like the student code of conduct, and putting in there saying, hey, look at our student code of conduct says you're not allowed to rush the field and you can be expelled if you do that. And enforcing that might change people's behavior.
All right, I'll introduce another topic here, Gil. This goes again back to sports facility construction and risk mitigation. Nissan Stadium, where the Tennessee Titans are going to have just signed a 20-year deal with Constellation Energy to operate a dedicated on-site energy plant that will provide heating, cooling, backup power for the stadium. And the reason for this is grid reliability risk. Again, go back to the Super Bowl several years ago in New Orleans, where they had a power outage during the middle of the game. That was probably one of the most horrible moments in that stadium manager's life. And I think, Gail, we did some research on it, and the guy actually had PTSD. And I can literally see that because he was under such pressure. It's such a horrific event in his life. So that all sounds good, building your own power grid, but it comes at a huge eye-popping cost to do that. That's the downside of it. You're reducing one risk, but you're spending a lot of money. So just thoughts. If you're building a new sports facility, is this an avenue you pursue? Is the money worth the risk of losing an event, or something like losing your HVAC during an event? How far do you take this thing? Put your caps on, thinking caps on, and is this a cost that you're willing to eat? Any thoughts on that? And again, there's something like this. There's no right or wrong answer.
There could be, maybe.
Okay. Well, thanks, Gil. Now they'll never say anything.
No, if you and I say it, it could be wrong.
Yeah. How about you, Colby? What I haven't heard from you today. I don't think. What would you do?
Yeah, so what would the for the cost outweigh what? Sorry.
The benefit of having your own energy grid, where if the city of, let's say your sports facility is in Providence, if your Providence lost power, you would have your electrical grid, so you could keep on going with your event. You'd still have HVAC, you'd still have cooling, that sort of thing. It costs a lot of money to do something like that. Is it worth it?
I would say it is definitely a great perk to have. Like, obviously, for someone like the Super Bowl, when the power goes out, like that's a very costly error and something that obviously doesn't happen very often. So I would say, depending on how costly it is, it's definitely obviously a good thing to have. So I mean, I would say ultimately, if you can afford it and it's not too much of an expense, yes, it's a great thing to have. But I don't think it would come into play. I can't imagine that cities are losing power, or I've obviously never seen before a stadium losing power other than the Super Bowl. But if you can avoid it and if you can afford it, then yes, it is a good thing to have.
Okay, and it happens occasionally. I grew up in the New York area, where they're famous for having a blackout every, I don't know, 10 years. And I remember I had tickets to a Mets game,
Mhm.
And I was very, very disappointed that they couldn't play the game because they had no power. When I was a kid, I didn't understand why they just couldn't play the game, because baseball doesn't need power. You just throw the ball, hit the ball. But so it happens. I think we brought up another example in the Toronto, whatever they call that, Rogers Center, where they lost a major concert because Toronto was having all sorts of, I can't remember if that was power or internet problems. Either way, their ticketing system went dead, and so they had to just say, hey, no sold out concert today. So it happens. How about let's see, who else haven't we heard from? How about you, Eileen? What do you think?
It would definitely be an investment I'd sink into. Sports need electricity. The PA needs electricity. Lights need to be on. Fans need to stay, and it's all about the money at the end of the day. So yeah, I'd invest.
Okay. Here at Oriole Park, we have generators. So if the power goes out, we just have emergency power. That's enough to get us the fans, enough lights on to get the fans safely out of the stadium, but would not allow us to continue playing the baseball or football game at M&T. But we do have generators that automatically kick on if we lose power. Fortunately, for here at Oriole Park, we're fed by two separate sub feeders, so the odds of both of them going out at the same time are a little less likely than your normal power outage, but it could happen. Gil, what are your thoughts? What would you, if you're building a new sports facility, a large NFL stadium, would this be something you invest in or not?
I personally would not. I think there are more critical areas that are needed, primarily on the large stadium side. You need more storage space. If you ask any venue manager, that's probably going to be the number one thing that they wish they had more of, especially if you're going to have, like in an urban area where you're going to have cars or trucks trying to pull in and to unload and load and things like that, that would be a priority for me, because that's what you're going to be seeing on a regular basis. That doesn't mean that there aren't efforts on a regular basis to try to bring in extra power. And probably one of the biggest examples that I remember of that is when I was on the mayor's task force to build what is now Minute Maid Field in Houston. That initially it was, as Matt mentioned, it was going to be called Enron Field. And the reason why that location was chosen was that we on the committee wanted to build it closer to where the current football stadium is, right next to the Astrodome. But Kenneth Lay had the ear of the mayor, and he told the mayor, look, if you build this, venue downtown, we're going to build a chilled water plant for air conditioning for the entire downtown Houston area, and it will save all this money, and we'll be able to provide cooling for all the skyscrapers there and all this kind of stuff. And he talked this beautiful dream about what they could do to save money and help the downtown out and everything else. And Kenneth Lay was the CEO of Enron. So he was lying, just like the whole company Enron was a lie. And they never built the chilled water plant or anything else. So you could raise it as a bargaining chip, and maybe that will work for Nissan, but for that new venue. But once you've been burned once, you're reluctant to try to go down that same path again.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do it either, Gail. It's a lot of money for something that may not come up. So yeah, I could agree with you. And does anyone else have any thoughts on that?
I mean, I kind of agree with what Colby said earlier. Like, it's good to have, but it depends what the franchise is. If it's in Boston, you can generate tons of revenue. I think it's a good idea, but I think you need to assess what organization you have and how much revenue you're bringing in, how much money you have, and then spend on it. And also look at the environment as well. If you're in an atmosphere that always goes through power outages, assess it. But if you're in an area that never experiences it or experiences one every 5 years, I don't think it's necessary at all. We're spending the money.
Good thought. Anyone else on that topic? All right.
Also, have been a number of stadiums that have tried to use ancillary power generation, whether it be water, solar, or things like that. And for most, it really hasn't been a successful journey. Probably one of the biggest ones was with the Philadelphia Eagles, when the owner's wife was a gung-ho environmentalist, and he put wind turbines and solar, and he was trying to do all these different things, and the total impact was limited. And then when he divorced that wife, he got rid of all the material. I guess it wasn't an important feature for him, but it goes to a different thing, which is the cost. And I'm sure that as you go through this course, you're going to be taking a look at that. Energy costs for stadiums are astronomical. And part of that is the way that you have to buy energy and how it is sold is based upon what you will need to use on a given day when you have an event day. And you charge that amount regardless of whether you use it or not, because they have to make it available for you if you need it. So the cost of energy is quite significant. And if you could find a way to reduce that, that's phenomenal.
Yes. Yeah, we've looked into solar, all that stuff at Oriole Park, and just the cost payback isn't there yet. So I would definitely agree with that. All right, I do have one last topic, and it's kind of on supply chain, and it's about the football club in Barcelona. I guess they're doing a renovation of their stadium, and they faced significant delays to the point where they missed the due date when the stadium was going to be ready again. They've had to play at a different home, and I guess they're blaming the delays on the supply chain delays on the war in Ukraine and some other factors. And I can tell you, during COVID, the supply chain was severely disrupted for sports facilities and everyone else. And not only did price escalate quite a bit, you weren't really sure when you were going to get your parts in, which when you needed it. And the other thing that's sort of in the news, the tariffs. It didn't create a disruption in delivery of materials, but there was some uncertainty of now how much things were going to cost. Like if you're looking from steel from Japan, just hypothetically, and you're expecting it to cost X amount, now it could go up a lot. So I guess the question is, and it's a hard one, how can you mitigate supply chain concerns where your pricing or your supply can either drastically go up or become limited by some unforeseen events? Is there anything you can do? And I know that's a difficult question. Anyone with any thoughts on that?
I think is my mic working now?
Yep, you're good.
Sounds good. Sorry about that. So I actually went to Barcelona a couple years ago, and I went to a soccer game at the stadium that is filling in for the new one, and it definitely wasn't the same, I would say, as the one that's going to be built. But as for the supply chain issues, I would say my best recommendation would probably be, I mean, I'm sure they're probably already doing this, but I would say it would be to try and buy all the material they can as local as they can to mitigate the tariffs. I feel like that's like the number one thing that companies are dealing with this issue.
Yeah, that's a possibility. Other things I can think of, like you could do deals in advance with certain contractors that you guarantee them the business. If they guarantee the price and the delivery date, put the burden on them a little bit. Gil, do you have any thoughts? It's a hard question. And I think that we all had a crash course during COVID of what could be done and couldn't be done and stuff.
So there's a book that you might want to take a look at. R.S. Means puts out a a square foot analysis book, which looks at the cost of building facilities. And one of the things that they examine is the regionality. So going to Brady's comment about buying local, if you're in Hawaii, you can't buy local. It has to be shipped in. If you're in Alabama, it's going to be cheaper to build than in most other locations. So a lot of that's going to be location based. And while the national average is considered 1, in Alabama is like a 0.88, so it's cheaper than the national. California and Hawaii, because of regulations and distance and stuff like that, it could be about a 1.3. So it's about 30% higher than other costs. So, trying to see if you can get local, that might reduce tariffs, but also might reduce transportation costs. Sometimes you have to have steel girders that aren't made in America that have to come down to Canada, and transportation costs can be significant. One of the things that is often not looked at is called a currency hedge. That if you're going to be buying stuff from overseas, the dollar could drop. And if the dollar drops, you can't buy as much with the same dollar. And that means you're going to have to be paying more money for whatever it is that you're trying to get. So some people try to do things with hedging bet of what currency might do, and they try buying some short, some long, to try to protect themselves from that, or they just go to the local international bank and try to buy. Let's say if they're going to be buying something from Canada and buy, $500,000 worth of Canadian dollars, just in case if they anticipate that the U.S. Market might go down and the value of the dollar might decrease. That way, they have some kind of protection going forward. So those are certain things to do. Some I've seen stadiums go into partnerships with suppliers and say, hey, look, if you keep the cost at this, we're going to give you sponsorship entitlement. You could get, seats at a reduced cost, a luxury suite at a reduced cost, things like that, trying to build partnerships. I've seen that doing in the past as well. Any other thoughts that you guys have about that one?
Yeah, that's a tough one to deal with.
Yeah.
But those things happen. You'll learn in business, and so whether you're in the sports facility business or not, that the unexpected will happen, and you just have to deal with it best you can. And hopefully, have some contingencies in place.
Yeah, that's where value-based engineering really comes into play. I was involved with building of a large field house in New Haven. It's called the Floyd Little Field House. And we had put in a price for putting in the flooring that we wanted. And then the mayor came back and said, look, I want to have my inauguration ball there. So I want you to put in this fancy tile. And all of a sudden, the price went up significantly to do that one change. And that added an extra about $400,000 to the price of the venue. And so that's the unexpected. We were prepared for a certain amount. They did a change order. And that becomes one of the things, and I know Matt has to deal with this on a regular basis, that you plan for X. But when you do a little tweak, that's when things normally hit the fan. And that little tweak could be several $100,000 to several $1 million for a change. And that becomes part of planning. Did you in fact plan for this? How could you effectively plan for things like that? And part of that is just having two options from the very beginning and choosing one or another, and then sticking with that decision.
And as Gil mentioned, I'll leave you with a real life hypothetical that just happened to us. Change is costly when you're doing any sports facility construction. We're putting in a new scoreboard at Oriole Park, and it's much larger than the old one, video board, I should say. And after they started construction, the engineers discovered, despite all the best planning of the architects, that the structural support wasn't strong enough, so they needed more steel. And when you're doing something in the middle of a construction project, it costs so much more, because now everything has to be rushed. You're paying extra shipping costs. You're paying overtime costs for the workers, and so on and so forth. You're paying so much more for a change than you would have if you had gotten it right from the get-go. And it's just it adds up real quick. That's why when you see these stories where, hey, they're building a $100 million stadium, and then 2 years later it comes in at 175 million. That's what happens.
Value-based engineering, can't stress it enough.
It's a dirty word sometimes, yeah.
I mean, for architects, they hate that. And for builders, they hate that. But for owners, it's critical. And the same as when you start looking at, especially because you're looking at the construction side of things right now, that when you do your bid process, that it's best to get a bid where it has the cost escalators in there and everything else, that the developer is going to take on that risk and that burden if the costs go up. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck with it.
Again, thank you everyone for your time. I know this is a little different. I'm sure we'll get back to our normal routine next week, but we had a good conversation. Please feel free to reach out to us when you have issues or concerns about what you're doing this week, or just any questions in general. We're here from you. I like hearing from you. Always happy to help out.